Hello, Seiiti Arata. Every vicious cycle can be broken if we interrupt the pattern. Now, before I go into detail about how to interrupt the pattern, let's first understand what a vicious cycle is. A vicious cycle happens when you're going through a period of lack of motivation, lack of organization, and some paralyzing laziness. On the psychological side, your thoughts become repetitive. It is as if some sort of obsession takes over your brain. You exclusively think about one unpleasant thing, even though you know it is clearly harming you. And when someone tries to talk to you about something else, well, you're not receptive to that because your mind is still playing over and over that same message that is hurting you. And there are different events that can be the initial trigger for that vicious cycle. For example, a political decision that you do not agree with, or being shaken about your pet's passing, finding out that you have been betrayed by someone you loved, or being fired unjustly from your job. These are just some examples. But what all these examples have in common is a negative, undesired event that has already happened. The situation shocked you at that moment, but even after several days, you keep on thinking about it repeatedly, and you continue to feel negative emotions. These emotions affect you so strongly that it becomes really difficult to do simple daily tasks, such as clean the house, or exercise, or study, or have pleasant conversations with the people in your life. Even if you do not want to be in a negative state, you have a hard time trying to get out of that negative state. A vicious cycle is different from clinical depression, which needs to be diagnosed and treated by a health professional. A vicious cycle is a temporary phase. It has a natural end. It can take a while, but you will eventually return to a more productive or more positive mindset. So if this is a temporary phase, what is the problem? Well, the problem is feeling that you have wasted all those days when you were inside this negative cycle without being productive, or without enjoying your life, without taking care of yourself. That is why it is so helpful to find out ways to get out of a vicious cycle as fast as possible. So you'll now learn about the pattern interruption technique. And with this simple technique, you will be able to get out of the negative phase more easily without wasting too much time feeling worthless. Do you understand the practical advantage of mastering this technique? It is like having a button in your brain that can get you back in control whenever you start deviating from your goals. When you learn how to break a vicious cycle, you can regain focus whenever you need to. Now imagine how your life would be like when you develop this ability. How does it sound? This is what we're going to learn now. Your life will always have positive and negative phases. This is why you need to learn the fastest way out of the negative phases. Try to remember a positive phase in your life. During a positive phase, you eat well, you sleep well, you read books, you exercise, you maintain good relationships, and you have a good performance at work. Everything seems to be working well until something bad happens. A new manager at your workplace, laying out pointless rules. A political party that you despise comes into power and your country seems to be doomed. A knee injury stops you from exercising. An investment you made just plummets and you lose a large amount of money. Your pet gets run over by a car when crossing the road. Whatever the initial event is, it causes you to enter a negative phase. And when something bad happens in your life, you may enter a vicious cycle. Since you don't exercise anymore, now you lose your motivation to eat well. And as a result, you feel like you don't want to read either. Then you watch TV until very late night, and this affects your sleep until you lose focus during the next day, performing worse at work. This is why this is called a cycle. One thing leads to another, and suddenly your life is a complete mess. You lose your motivation. You know pretty well you should change things up, but you have a hard time doing so. Days and weeks pass by, and you still have an inner conflict, because on the one side you would like things to be different, but on the other hand, you don't have the motivation to change. These bad periods happen to everyone. Life is cyclic. No one goes through life without problems. That is why it makes no logical sense to try to avoid problems or unwanted events that could trigger a bad phase. Sooner or later, problems will appear inevitably. So it is wise to get ourselves out of the negative cycles as fast as possible. And the best way to quickly break a vicious cycle is by using the pattern interruption technique. Since bad phases are unavoidable, we're going to learn something that will help you to get out of the negative cycles quicker. This is called the pattern interruption technique. Interrupting the pattern will not substitute therapy or solve all your problems overnight, but interrupting the pattern helps you to clearly see that you are in a vicious cycle and it can be changed. Interrupting the pattern means that you can do something in the opposite direction of the things that you are doing at the moment. For example, in a vicious cycle, you might be doing negative tasks such as sleeping poorly, eating unhealthily, procrastinating, not cleaning your house, or exceeding the amount of time you spend in front of your TV or video games or social networks. These negative actions feed on one another, trapping you on a negative pattern. Now, to break the vicious cycle, you have to interrupt one of these patterns and do something radically opposite, even if you do not feel like it. I'll give you an example of someone who is completely unmotivated, has basically done nothing right for weeks. This person's life is a mess, and you can see it in their house. It has been days since they did the dishes. The floors are completely dirty. So suddenly that person decides to break the cycle. They could start going to the gym again, or reading books again, or trying to sleep better. These are a little bit complicated, but instead they decide simply to do the dishes. That is how they will be interrupting the pattern. The same way one negative action leads to another, all it takes is one positive action to break a vicious cycle. For example, by doing a small task like washing the dishes, we are interrupting the pattern of the vicious cycle. If we pay attention to the dishes, being 100% focused, then we can start to break the cycle. Because there is no point in doing the dishes while your thoughts keep on repeating those messages that basically make you prisoner of that vicious cycle. You need to be present, to focus. And if you need help with full presence, you can watch episode 160 from the Hello, Seiiti Arata series, where we talk about mindfulness. When you realize that you have done something positive, despite being as simple as just washing the dishes, then you can take the next step. Now you can clean the house. And an organized house makes you maybe want to organize your emails, which makes you motivated to restart an old job and to be focused at work, and then now you need to sleep better. And by sleeping better, now you have more energy, perhaps to start exercising again, which leads you to eat better. A simple pattern interrupt can make you get out of a negative phase without having to waste days or even weeks trapped in a vicious cycle. The only barrier you need to overcome is the lack of motivation to do that tiny task. When we are in a vicious cycle, small tasks, like doing the dishes, can seem pretty challenging. That is why you need to interrupt the pattern in the easiest way you can. Choose one small thing that will break that negative behavior pattern and do that thing, even though you might not feel like doing it at that time. The secret to interrupting the pattern is just this: take action, even with zero motivation. You do not need motivation to take action. What you need is action, so then you can have motivation. If you're able to take action, this can get you out of the paralysis. And you need to act, even without motivation, so you can do something simple like doing the dishes or going out for a walk. Turn off the autopilot, start moving. This small positive action feeds another one, and then you can begin to regain the motivation that you used to have. So don't just sit and wait for motivation to show up in order to take action. Instead, take action now. This is how motivation happens. Interrupting the pattern flips the expected order of things. Instead of having motivation to take action, you take action in order to have motivation. And if you think that you always need motivation first in order to do something, to take action, think again. You already do things every day without motivation. You don't need to be inspired to brush your teeth, to change your clothes, to have lunch. You just go and do it. So you can also simply decide to do something completely opposite to that cyclic behavior pattern. Even though it is a small task, it will interrupt the negative cycle. This is a difficult attitude to take, but once you set it in motion, it will tend to stay in motion. Celebrate your small actions. Your happiness is built by small blocks of joy. Remember to celebrate your small actions. You can even reward yourself for acting in a positive way. See, we used to think of happiness as this huge thing that happens when we finally accomplish incredible goals in life. But positive psychology proved that this generic and constant happiness is not what actually happens in real life. Actually, happiness is built by small blocks of joy, the small things in life. When you are in a vicious cycle, your mental state only sees negativity everywhere. So that is why celebrating the small wins, being happy for taking action is an important part of the pattern interruption technique. By doing this, you combine both the rational and also the emotional side of your brain. After all, even during the vicious cycle, your rational side always knows what you should be doing. The problem is that the emotional side is so negative that even though it knows what you have to do, it ends up not doing it. And this is the reason why it is so important to reward yourself for the small victories. By being happy for every little step, you begin to put the small blocks together and they create a bigger feeling of happiness. This will allow you to take bigger steps, stepping up your actions until you're back into your best productivity and positive state of mind. We all have ups and downs, but you can intentionally manipulate your actions so that the negative phases last the least amount of time possible, meaning you can quickly return to a better mental state. To do that, you need to interrupt the negativity pattern. You need to do something completely opposite to the behavioral patterns that you had during a bad phase. This small action will put you in motion and bring you motivation, which should be celebrated as a small victory. The combination of those small victories will put you back into the state of productivity and happiness that you deserve. Arata Academy is inviting you to learn more about the Happiness course. With this online course, you will learn several techniques that are proven by positive psychology, which will help you to stay in a positive mindset for as long as possible, avoiding the vicious cycles. You can participate in the Happiness project right now by visiting the link arata.se/happiness.